Sunday will mark 6 months since more than 1,200 people were killed and 250 people were abducted from Israel on the morning of October 7th. That morning, the Hamas-led attack took Israeli and foreign citizens captive and into Gaza. More than 100 of the hostages have since been released, many in prisoner exchange deals. About 100 hostages are still being held, according to Israeli officials. Sagui Dekel-Chen is one of the people still held by militants in Gaza. His father, Jonathan Dekel-Chen, joins us now. Jonathan, thank you so much for taking the time to speak with us. We really appreciate it. As I mentioned, Sunday will mark 6 months since the attack. It's been 6 months of pure horror for you as you await word on your son. But as you look back, what goes through your mind?
Well, first of all, thank you for having me and keeping this issue alive on the public stage. It's just one of those things that would otherwise be forgotten in the world community, Canada and beyond. What goes through my mind is that these have been 6 months of horror for the families of the 134 hostages still remaining in Hamas caves, in Hamas captivity. But also for the wider community in Israel, but of course also the people of Gaza. The people of Gaza have been really since 2007, and certainly since October 7th of last year, have been captives of Hamas. And Hamas, its savage massacre and hostage taking in Israel on October 7th set off a chain of events that brings us to this place that we find ourselves in, where my son and other men, women, and children are still being held in horrific conditions in Gaza, and all of the people of Gaza are in misery. And the only way this stops is by Hamas returning these hostages, both those who are alive and unfortunately the many who probably have died as a result of October 7th. And 6 months in captivity. This nightmare for everyone ends only when Hamas returns these people.
I think for a lot of parents watching, it's absolutely unimaginable to fathom or think about what it would be like not knowing where their child is. But this is your reality every day. Is he getting food? Is he well? What kind of condition is he in? What is it like not knowing?
It's a nightmare every day, but I would go one step beyond that. In our case, Sagui's 35 years old. When he was taken hostage, his beautiful wife was 7 months pregnant with 2 little girls, scared for their lives in their safe room in their home on Kibbutz Nir Oz. Sagui was taken at around 9:30 in the morning on October 7th, trying to defend them. He has no idea whether his family survived, or anyone else for that matter, whether they survived the massacre on Nir Oz. So I unfortunately have little doubt that his physical condition, if he in fact is still alive, his physical condition is horrible, as are the rest of the hostages. But I think the worst kind of torture for him would be not knowing if his wife and now 3 daughters. His third daughter was born in the middle of December, so about 2 months after he was taken hostage, him not knowing what became of them that morning.
Jonathan, when was the last time you heard any information or any word about his whereabouts? Because as you say, he was taken on October 7th from his kibbutz. And as you have uncertainty about his well-being, if he's still alive, he certainly has doubts about whether his wife and his now 3 daughters are alive as well.
Well, like many others, certainly from our kibbutz and other hostage families, the little information that we do have about them came from the hostages who were released. You mentioned it a little earlier. About 100 hostages, women and children, were released by Hamas in an earlier deal, late November, early December. Of those 100 or so hostages who were released, 40 of them, 40 women and children, were from my kibbutz community, and they were able to give us, many of us, some kind of testimony as to what they had seen, and particularly who they had seen while in captivity. And we know from them from a few women and a couple of teenagers that they saw very briefly. They saw Sagui and other hostages from our community in the tunnels under Gaza. But that was true as of late November. Since that time, we have no information, and almost no families have any additional information. All we know is that they have been there for many months now, beyond late November, with death all around them, from their captors, of course, who I am sure showed on October 7th would have no hesitation to butcher them if they thought that was the right thing to do. But also, they're trapped in the middle of a war zone, our hostages. So danger and death is all around them.
When we talk about negotiations, they're ongoing with mediators from Egypt and Qatar involved. The United States, obviously a major player there as well, pushing for a ceasefire, pushing for the release of every single hostage to ensure that people like your son come home. When you're looking at what you can see about these negotiations and what you're hearing about it, are you satisfied with the efforts that are being made, not only by international partners, but by the coalition government of Benjamin Netanyahu as well?
Well, I can say this for all of the parties involved, Hamas and Israel, that obviously they are the two major players here. They have to say yes in order for the hostages to come home. But I would say, speaking for myself, and I'm pretty sure all of the other hostage families, all of these players will have done enough only when all of the hostages, all 134 of them, those that are still alive by some miracle, and those who are deceased, they will only have done enough when all of them are back home. And so I would avoid giving grades right now, because it doesn't matter until everyone is home. And all of these parties need to do, and I believe at least some of them are doing their utmost to get the hostages home, but all of them have to seriously engage, including my own government and this coalition, Benjamin Netanyahu's coalition, to prioritize the lives of the hostages, to get them home alive, those that are still possible. And no one, I don't think anyone in Israel, and I would hope any right-thinking people elsewhere in the world, believe that Hamas should be allowed to continue to govern over Gaza or continue to be any kind of military force. That's simply a truth, obviously for the good of Israel, but also for the good of the people of Gaza. But that alone should not dictate what the fate of the hostages is going to be. The hostages need to come out now. The Israeli government, the intermediaries, certainly have to do everything they can to leverage Hamas, to force Hamas to let these people go. And only then will our people be saved, and people be allowed to mourn those who have passed, but also the people of Gaza will be released from this living hell in which they currently exist.
I do want to ask you about a possible ground invasion into Rafah, a potential one by the IDF. As you say, your son, relatives of other families that you've been in touch with are being held there. They could potentially be in Rafah, and that is absolutely a concern that the United States has said as well, aside from the 1.5 million Palestinians who are there. When you think about such a ground assault, what are your concerns?
My concerns are for additional suffering. Look, as I said, I don't know if my son or any of the hostages are still alive. We don't. We've not been given any proof of life whatsoever since late November, which is a crime in itself by Hamas. Any more warfare, whether it's by ground, air, sea, you have it, puts the hostages in danger. And so, again, while I completely understand, and I've lived on the border with Gaza for the better part of the last 40 years, no one understands more than I do. No one in this current government in Israel or anywhere else understands more than I do how and why Hamas must be eradicated as a governing and military force. But that cannot mean that the lives of these hostages are going to be sacrificed a second time by my government. We were completely abandoned on October 7th, the border communities. It is unfathomable to me that our government, the Israeli government, would allow these hostages to be sacrificed a second time because of a military operation. These are two separate things, and our government and again, I believe certainly the intermediaries have a moral obligation to get them out. If all of these people die in the hands of Hamas, a murderous terrorist organization, not only will that be our personal tragedy and perhaps a national tragedy, this is a very bad sign for the world when a radical religious terrorist organization can act freely to invade civilian communities, murder, rape, and loot, go home, and then dictate the fate of those people that they've taken hostage. So there's nothing not to worry about. I'll simplify things for you every moment of every day.
Jonathan, thank you again for taking the time, and we hope the next time you speak with us, you can talk about how you were able to hold your son in your arms again, and hopefully that he was able to meet his youngest child. Jonathan Dekel-Chen, his son Sagui, is being held hostage by Hamas inside Gaza. Thank you very much.
Thank you for having me.